order at 6 o'clock. I would like to acknowledge that we are holding today's meeting on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. And I'd like to welcome you all for tonight. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Any changes in order? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve, please, from Trustee Barron and Trustee Wilkinson. All in favor? Carried. All right, motion to approve the minutes, please. Trustee McKay, Trustee O'Neill, all in favor? Carried. All right, we will be starting our evening with a presentation from Mr. Zver regarding the 2019-2020 budget. Mr. Zver, I will give you the floor.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving myself, the president of QP Local 606, the opportunity to speak on behalf of their support staff and employees of the district. Our budget presentation actually has numbers. Some won't, but these one does. Am I missing something on the...
Just right click on the side, Rob.
I am. There it is. Okay. As you can see on the first page there, this is taken from the school district, and it just basically is looking at the accumulated operating surplus from 2014, starting with over 7,800,000, going down to 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and back up to 7.1 million. And the amount of money that goes down the line in local capital and then cash on hand. Everybody asked, how much money does the school district actually have on hand? There it is, $31 million. It may be needed for other things, but that's actually the cash that is available. It's not in assets, it's not in anything else, it's actually the cash on hand. Going forward, this is the operating surplus and deficit sheet for which the last trustees voted on, and is currently the policy of the district, where it says the minimum level should be about 1.7 to a maximum level of 4.5 if you add all those columns up. In years, and if you looked at the previous sheet, in year 2014, we exceeded that number by quite a bit. In year 2015, 4.5 was exceeded. I think in 16, it may have been close because the amount of money went up. 17 probably was close to the 4.5, but probably exceeded it. And then again in 18, we were well over the 4.5 threshold. So when a district has a maximum and a minimum, and that line is always exceeded, it tells me that we have the availability to use some additional funding. And going that way, I've put in some concerned areas, and these have been talked about for over the years. These were the areas that were cut to become sustainable. So in QP's way, it believes that if you put this money back in some of these areas, it would help the school district achieve better efficiencies in maintaining their buildings and their grounds. And also, if you look at the community school coordinators were on the chopping block last year, and they're still not knowing whether they do that. I've included that in the cost. And school secretary ones, bringing them in around $60,000 to increase the formula so that they could work beside, and in addition to the other secretaries during peak times or startup and school shutdown. We believe, just to show a point, on the 4 jobs that I put on there, this is augmentation work. Some of this is ours, but most of this is contractors. Contractors come with a cost. And the reason we use so many contractors is we don't have the workforce to maintain our buildings for which the school district would like to keep them in. So we can't get to the work. And other people have to come in and work alongside, or come into the buildings and do a complete school. As you can see, lighting program was done outside. On our list, we asked for electrician so that we can achieve those lighting. And we do it for much cheaper than $98 to $100 an hour. Our costs are probably around 40 to 41. Playground equipment, we used to do a lot of it. it's been phased out because there's no grounds work. Some of the capital project jobs we won't do because they're too big, but carrying on, you can see the extent of some of those that we do and some that we don't. We used to paint all the exterior buildings of the schools. We no longer do that because we devastated our painting programs. Didn't ask for a painter in there because that's seasonal work. Keep it around all year round. Might be or not be doable, but that's what happens when we change our structure. And then we get into the amended budget, for which is this year's. When we were presented this, it showed what we were spending and what we believe we would achieve. And I believe, based on the spending pattern that's there in the previous 5 years before that, the school district will likely meet or exceed a $6 million surplus. Not the 1.8 that is registered there. I believe it'll reach $6 million. And that's barring any unforeseen costs that could occur, or money being floated into local capital for which wasn't designated before. But my belief is it's only at 49%. We're already into February. The amount of money that'll be left over will exceed $6 million. If you're able to look at the previous slides, live within the operating policy of anywhere between 1.1 or 1.7 and 4.5, you can achieve putting that $700,000 in there and would not bring the harm of going below the 1.7%. You might go below the maximum 4.5, but you will not hit anywhere near the 1.7. To achieve that, you need about $2.8 million in a surplus, and every year that's been well exceeded. CUPE feels that these additions and rollover budget will help further the district to achieve a sustainable level of services to the students. So if there's any questions on it, I should have asked probably through it. I know I kind of went fast, but if there's any questions, I'll take them now.
I'm not sure to whom to address this, but Rob, I thought I heard you make a comment that there's no grounds work. I wanted to ask if I heard correctly, or do we have grounds workers, or what's the...
Yes, we do have grounds people, but what I'm saying though is when you start eliminating positions, grounds work goes out to others. We used to do the playground equipment.
Yeah.
We no longer have the ability to do it as you cut services because you have to focus on the key.
Okay.
And those are not key services anymore. And I'm going back quite a few years. I'm not asking that ought necessarily return, but those are the things that happen. We wanted to become sustainable. Sustainable doesn't mean that you should be running $7 million surpluses or 5.4, because those services were never cut for the reason of achieving other than a balanced budget. Nobody said that the services should have been reduced because we didn't need the work. Some of you trustees were here when those discussions were on. It wasn't that the work was not needed, it was to achieve a sustainable balanced budget. Those numbers for the last 5 years, and the number I showed you coming into this year, proves there is sustainability and more.
Trustee Kelly.
Through the chair, may I ask a question to the presenter? Rob, is that okay? So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So in your presentation, under areas of concern,
Yep.
you had mentioned that one full-time equivalent carpenter, groundsperson, electrician, and one additional position, I suppose, were cut previously as part of...
There was even more reductions in this. This is just an ask that's reasonably can be found to put back in. This doesn't meet what was taken out of those areas. This is just a ask because some of them have come back over the last couple of years, but we're still not at the numbers that were reduced prior.
Just a follow-up, if I may?
You may, yes.
So who's doing the work that those positions would have been doing now?
As I showed you on the augmentation sheet, some of those are being done by contractors on the outside.
Thank you.
Darcy.
I want to follow up on that conversation. And I don't know if people have the specific enough information, but can anyone answer, kind of to dive down more deeply on that? to what extent are these positions contracted out, or
No, more accurately, to the extent that we're contracting out on either carpentry, grounds work, or electrical work, or would that cover or reflect a full-time position? Does that question make? No, everybody's looking at me very blankly. Do you? Do you want to put it in English?
Well, maybe what I'm wrong is that you're asking that is the amount that we contract out this work equal to 1 FTE? Because I think what you might be saying is that the contracting out isn't equal to 1 FTE, so it makes more sense then?
No, I'm wondering about that. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm wondering to the extent to which we contract out, is it equivalent to a full-time person? Or is it spread out across? Like, could we simply hire one electrician and that would address the contracting out in that area? Does that make sense? I give up.
I think what you're saying is there enough work that we contract out such that you could turn around and make full-time FTEs? And I think that our Director of Planning and Operations, Pete Sabo, isn't here tonight, but he is always asking himself that question. The problem with that is that the work doesn't always consistently happen 40 hours a week all throughout the year, right? So we do a lot of work in the summertime and at different times in the year. So the better question is, even if you could make up 1 FTE or more, would it be needed in that manner, i.e., so it would equalize over an annual year? Did that explain?
Yes, thank you.
If I can, because in my presentation, I did not reflect that we were asking that the contractors necessarily be removed from there. They're at an additional cost. The $700,000 would not be taken away from the work that was being done on the outside. That $700,000 can be achieved from the surpluses that are going forward. If there's a requirement to get work done in the district and they have the ability to fund those, we're not saying that they wouldn't get done. We're saying because of cuts, more jobs are going out. And the planning then becomes, we'll do it at this time because we know we can get some guys to come in and we'll spend more money in a shorter duration than we would to make it go over the whole year. Some of this work doesn't have to be done immediately, it could be spread out. In terms of planning, you can have a company come in and put 5 guys on the ground for 2 weeks during a spring break, spend more money, and achieve what you accomplished. But at the end of the day, the services that they provide are not guaranteed beyond. They come in, they leave. They're not looking for additional work. They'll finish the work that they do, and if they find something else, it's not going to get touched. It's going to get left and be proceeded to be cost out later. Advantages for your own workers is they look for problems. They resolve problems before they become bigger problems. Contractors do not. They're not coming in there to help you. They're coming in to get the job done and be paid. Workers that you have on the ground, make sure that when they finish the job, they're looking for additional things that could happen, report it so it could be done sooner and probably at less cost. There's efficiencies.
Trustee O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I think it's kind of in the same vein as to whether we have enough work in the district for a full-time electrician, but the second part to that, and actually sort of in application to all of these, would be, do we have qualified tradespeople who are ready to step into those positions?
We do at this current time, but if you wait longer, no. Because people aren't coming here if there's no meaningful work, and they're told they might be here for 2-3 months, laid off for 3 weeks, maybe come back for 2-3 months, laid off for a week, come back for 2-3 months, because we have some that work 7 months, laid off for 2 days, back for 5 months, laid off for 2 days. That's not problematic, and the only reason is they say they don't have regular funding to keep them on year by year, yet they almost work 10 months a year.
Trustee Higginson.
Thanks. You mentioned wages after, on the next slide, after you talk about the areas of concern. And knowing, particularly around the facility staffing, what's happening around us with trades, are we able to pay marketable or matching, whatever the right term is, wage for these positions as to what they're able, because you're talking about having people who are willing to do the work now to step into the positions. Are we competitive? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
For the positions that are named here, we have people that are here that would stay here and likely want to be here because they now have a full-time job with benefits, with vacation entitlement, rather than working 5 months and leaving.
Yeah.
The areas of concern that we don't have, and it wasn't addressed in there because I can't pull the rabbit out and find HR, which is our heating. We have one person in the whole district and we're trying to hire 2 more. And the reasons we're restricted is our wages don't compete in the market. All that work is being done out at $95 an hour, yet if we could do it in-house, it would be about 42 with the benefits and everything in. So we're paying double because we get a reduced rate as a school district because of the amount of work we can provide, but we're paying $95 an hour. And yes, and some of it's semantics because BCPC doesn't necessarily allow us the opportunity to increase the market value. It takes a lot, and I get that, but we need to find a way to bring people into the district. So I didn't put those jobs up there because they're already in the budget. We're not asking for jobs that are in the budget because we can't say magically hire somebody. We would, if we can find an HVAC guy, they're already in the budget. 2 of them, they're in the budget. Facilities planning's another area. They're in the budget, but we can't find people to come. These are jobs that are here. These people are willing to work. Just give them the nod that they can have full-time work and they'll sign on and be here. We then may have to look for additional casuals to come back in, but at least they will stay and we're not behind the 8 ball.
Have you seen any other questions? Trustee Stanley?
I want to move on to another position, which is the maintaining community school coordinators. I have a 2-fold question. One is, so how are they currently funded? And I see that we're doing a review, because I just got an email about that to fill out. Given that we're currently involved in a review of that program, will that review be done before budgeting? So in other words, will we have that information to make with regards to this budget? And can you answer that kind of like how that scenario will play out?
If I may.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
So the community school coordinator review, we're expecting to have preliminary recommendations by the end of April. And I'm looking at our assistant superintendent, Bob Esslinger, because he is currently leading that. So is there anything more that you might add to that?
No, that's their commitment to us when they undertook the RFP was to give us some preliminary recommendations either before or at the end of April so we could use those for budget reasons.
Okay.
I'm going to put myself on the list and ask a follow-up and related to that.
But I had a second part.
You did? Okay, so I'll put myself
first,
on there for next.
So the board last year decided to fund them out of surplus money. So if some or all of the community school coordinators are to continue based on the review recommendations and then ultimately the board's decision around that, we would need to find monies out of the operating budget for that, for those positions.
Okay, thank you.
That's hence the $6 million they anticipate will be the actual number for surplus. So even if you said you used money that was coming from the surplus budget, that won't be necessary if you're running a $6 million surplus, because all that is adding in and taking it back out and putting it back into the surplus again. So it's not being spent. It was being released for if we could not maintain a budget, there would be money to be able to be borrowed from to use in those places. And that's a way to keep the budget the way it flows. There is enough money to cover it when you put it through at the beginning of the year. If you're not anticipated to spend all your money, you can't say you borrowed from the surplus and then didn't spend it and say it's not a surplus. It is a surplus, but it was a previous year one, so it kind of gets, I guess it's an accounting thing that school districts do. It's just money in and money out. I look at it from, you can take it out of your bank account, but if you have a bigger surplus at the end of the year, you didn't spend your surplus to begin with. That's the way I look at it. And I don't think when they asked the ministry, when I was down there, they didn't tell me I was wrong, so.
Okay, Trustee Higginson.
Thanks. Just a point of clarification in terms of this is not my question, it's just a point of clarification. It's a budgeting thing that school districts do. I think it's actually an accounting practice that is required rather than calling it a budgeting thing that school districts do. It's an accounting practice that is required, particularly by the Auditor General. So, but my question is, on these recommendations under facilities for areas of concern, it's one thing to have the people do the work and projects, because I know there are projects not getting done, as you've pointed out, and I see them in my kids' schools as well. But do we have the money to actually do the project? It's one thing to have the person to do the project and have the reason the project's not getting done is because we don't have a person to fill the work order. But is it also that we don't have the money to do the project, like put in the, you know, the gate where someone wants a gate and a fence, or put in extra shelves in the library because there's books on the floor of the library? Like, there's the question around the cost of the facilities and the actual cost of the person. So would hiring these people solve a problem? Or would it just have more bodies and not be able to do it?
If you looked in there, Stephanie, or Trustee Higgins, there's $80,000 was put in there for including supplies. It's not $400,000 cost for the employees. It's actually probably greater than $80,000.
Oh, okay.
But I was high on the anticipation of what the cost for every employee was. Because I don't like to be under, I'd rather be
for the projects,
above.
I see.
So
Okay.
there's at least $80,000 plus in there for cost of supplies.
Trustee Keller.
Just a related question. We have a sense of how many, maybe I have the terminology wrong, but how many unfilled work orders we have within these areas?
Well, you were given a presentation the other night, and they had some of the numbers in there where they were saying electrical was getting closer. But part of that is because they now had Delmar go in and do some of the lighting work that people could do, so they retweaked the things. Other schools, and I can probably speak to some of the schools, they're not putting in the minor work requests they used to because they're not getting after them. So some of them get left until they become more major and then get reported. So we're actually probably spending time on jobs that are bigger than they should be because they don't necessarily get the same look when they're just a small project like they used to. And I mean, anybody from the senior table can say that. They don't believe that. I talk to the caretakers, I talk to the other people that are out there, and there is stuff that goes undone. It's just the nature.
Trustee McKay, because you haven't asked a question yet.
Thank you. Through the chair, the slide for this one, the district may easily reach a $6 million surplus. Can you tell me what that $6 million is made up from?
Do you want me to tell you where I got it from?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. One of the main line items, and it was spoken to, is the one around the sick use. If you look at how very low that is, and that trend is still going on. This district has not been able to fill some jobs. They've not been able to find enough staff to bring people in when people are off on sick or on vacation. So some of the schools are going without replacements. That will probably produce a $1.8 million to $2 million surplus at this time if it runs the current levels. In the teachers' salaries, I believe there will be probably $1.1 to $1.2 million easily achieved in there based on the trends from the 5 previous years. Educational assistant staff is at 47% into February. That's running probably 2% to 1 to 2% less, which is probably $185,000 to $280,000 saving. There was some money achieved from snow days that nobody was in at work. Inclement weather closed us down for 3 days. That amount of money is not reflected in here. So there is savings that came from other budget areas. I just didn't pull it all out because I could probably be here with about 6 or 7 sheets of paper that would say. But I sat and did this work, and if anybody's been around here long enough, I projected most of these increases or these surpluses being where they were, not the 1.8s. Never was I at 1.8, 1.4. I was closer to the numbers starting in 2014 right through. And if I don't make the number, I'm actually feel happy. I'd be the happiest guy in there not to see a $6 million surplus, because then I'd feel that the students got the services they deserved.
Trustee Stanley, you mentioned that.
Yes, I suspect that the person who can answer my question is not here, but I'm going to ask anyways, and maybe if, I'm talking about Director of Facilities, Pete Sabo. In his presentation previously, there was a comment made about wish projects and that they restricted the number of wish projects per school because they simply wouldn't get through them. I think that's what was said, if I'm recalling correctly. Do we have a restriction on number of projects or requested projects that are anything to do with maintenance or you know, necessary work? Like, would we restrict, you're only allowed so many projects per year of preventative maintenance, or, I mean, I'm assuming obviously we don't have, I hope we don't have any kind of emergency, you know, things that we restrict. We've had too many, we're just gonna not address them. But can I just ask the question, do we have restrictions on those types of asks from schools to facilities, or do I just need Pete to be here?
I think Pete would better answer the question, but we would not put a restriction on something that had to be done, if that answers your question. I mean, we wouldn't not fix something, safety issue, those, if that's what you're getting at.
That's generally, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that we don't have a restricted number. Do you know about preventative maintenance, or?
Well, again, preventative maintenance would be something that's done by our staff on a regular basis, and they wouldn't be sitting on for the most part, on a project list.
Okay, thank you.
Now, that doesn't mean to say that we're shifting priorities throughout the year based on needs and other things that get in the way, and whether or not some preventative maintenance might not get extended at times. Mm-hmm. But I'm giving you a very broad and general answer as opposed to specific.
I appreciate the attempt.
I just want to correct myself on the stuff that you said. It should probably be closer to about 800,000. I was adding in another one out of the support staff, because what we don't have in job replacements, but I would imagine that that money may be utilized by paying contractors at a higher rate. But we have some unfilled jobs that, if that was to trend out, that's where we would be. So that's why I say unforeseen cost. If somebody's having to pay out of the operating budget to the contractors at $95 an hour, that could eat a big hole into some of this money. But I don't anticipate our district going that far.
Oh, Trustee Higgins, I'm just a sec. Trustee Wilkinson, Trustee Robinson, you two have not had a chance to speak. Anything?
Thanks.
You're good? Okay, now Trustee Higginson.
I just want to circle back around to the HVAC, because we keep talking about the $95 versus the $45. And I think I'm correct on this, but I might be wrong. Are we, you mentioned BCPC, like we're restricted on the amount of money we can pay, correct? So even if we wanted to pay someone $95 an hour in order to be competitive and keep them on our salary and on our staff, we wouldn't be able to pay them $95 an hour as an HVAC specialist, because that's what people are paying in the private sector.
Nobody's making 95. That's the contractor's wage.
Okay. Sorry.
Like I use 45. That's what their benefits in, and that's probably a little high.
Okay.
But that's roughly what the going market is around there. And I think our wage is like 30 something plus the package. So it's low, and we don't have the ability to bring the person in. Can we get a way to find with BCPC? That would have to be a lot of work, and I know that. We tried it once before. It's a lot of work to try to get BCPC to understand how that can come about, because it sets trends for others. And that's why I'm saying I'm not here about that job. I'm here to say we need these other ones. I hope we can find some HVAC art guys and find a solution to the problem. There's nothing wrong about. We do need somebody to do our furnaces, our boilers, our refrigeration units all year round on a given basis. So those jobs are needed, and hopefully we can find a way to fill them. That's why, like I said, they weren't on there. That was just what happens sometimes if you're not in a competitive, or you don't have the ability, because we rolled it back one age back our guy off the list a while back. We laid him off. Now we realize that wasn't probably the right thing to do. We went from 3 heating to 2. Now we end up with 1.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Trustee Barrett, you also haven't asked any questions today. If I missed you at all? Okay. Anybody else? I have a quick one through to whoever can answer it. I know that currently we are paying the community school coordinators, we're using contingency to do that, to take care of that. And I know that up until 2002 or 3, they were paid under a specific envelope that was for community school coordinators. Who, prior to that, so let's say between 2008 and now, and prior to last year, what were they being paid under? Were they paid under our operating grant, or were they paid under a special purpose fund, or?
Our Associate Secretary Treasurer Maureen Hambley is with us tonight, and I think I would refer that question to her.
Okay, I can't be specific on any given year.
Okay.
But originally, the community school coordinators were funded out of Community Link. And there were a specific envelope within Community Link funding. And that got rolled into the Community Link pot. And so it's evolved over the years within the Community Link pot. And then a few years ago, and I can't remember exactly when, they were pulled out into operating so that Community Link could focus more on child and youth workers and, you know, the services that are really required by those vulnerable students. So that's where we sit right now. We've got, we no longer have them in Community Link. We no longer have them in the operating fund. So we're having to take surplus to fund them. While the intention was while the review was being performed. But the review isn't finished yet. So the use of surplus was only temporary to fund them for 1 year until it could be determined what the long-term goal would be.
Thank you, so that you clarified what I was trying to get at. 1 point put into the operating fund. Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear on. Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that, Bob? Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any Trustee O'Neill?
So I have one more question for the chair. So, Rob, and first of all, thank you for this presentation. When you have those 4 positions, we're talking about 7 positions total, yes? Can you enlighten me if these are all new positions, or if these are positions that you see bringing the district back to previous standards, and if so, how far back are we going?
Okay, the sustainable budget started in around 2014.
Okay.
Is when they came in with the notion, that was the past superintendent, Blaine's notion was we need to become sustainable. So 4 years ago when the trustees got elected, their first year budget it wasn't on, but in the second year budget it became we need to become sustainable. That was the big push, and the objective at that time was to actually take facilities down 30% reduction. The 30% reduction did not occur, and that was part and parcel because the school district was running surpluses of $7 million the previous year and $5 million on that one. The trustees of the day didn't go that deep. Wasn't meant that it wasn't thought of, but did not go that deep. We've now come back, and we were at that point, we were still on a bit of a declining enrollment. We're now in closing schools. That was a notion that happened. We're now growing again. So this is not adding in new jobs. This is actually putting back what we said at the beginning was when you become sustainable, can we add positions back in? The notion was we will look at that. Well, looking, I don't know how long you want to keep looking, and at what time do you decide that you need to do it? Is it becomes when the buildings become a condition that you no longer like? You know, if you look back the caretaker one, and I really didn't go in that field because I know I'm not going to ask for $2 million when there's not the ability to cover something, or $3 million or $1 million. Caretaker's level of cleansingness was supposed to be at a 3. It was 3.9. They can't make it to 3 with the amount of caretakers they have. They need to find some more efficiencies, and that became buying auto scrubbers, buying some other material stuff to help them. But we're still not getting to that level. So there's only 1 or 2 things that can achieve that, is either additional people or less square footage by closing something. Well, we're not closing, we're growing. And we had a commitment from the Secretary Treasurer in a roundabout way, if square footage opens up, they'll try to staff it, based on the money that comes in. I believe in good faith on that, and I leave that with them. So I didn't put up one that says, let's ask for more than trying to achieve what's necessary. These are areas we believe that are necessary because we can see other trucks pulling into our compound and doing our work. If there was nobody coming in here and we could see a list that had no augmentation on there other than what we normally used to do, heavy roof jobs, paving, and certain other things, flooring of large natures, now it's the day-to-day task. We're starting to get into the minute of doing simpler things than we used to ever obtain. And that becomes problematic. When we don't have the plumbing ability to put fountains in our schools, we have to get contractors to come in. That's problematic.
Thank you, Mr. Spare.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate the presentation. Just before, I've got everybody, I think. There was nothing else from anyone? Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we will move on to senior staff reports. Department of Learning Services will be presenting. No way.
You guys ready? Okay. Thank you. And Alex Whale, through the chair, thank you very much to the members of the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools Business Committee for providing time this evening for the Department of Learning Services to make presentation on budget decisions. My name is Tim Davey, Deputy Superintendent with the Department of Learning Services, and joining me this evening, Ms. Laura Tate, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary, Dr. Bob Eslinger, Assistant Superintendent for Diversity, Equity, and Student Support, and to my left, Mr. Ted Cadwallader, Director of Instruction, Indigenous Education, and Student Data. I'd also like to acknowledge our colleague, Ms. Lisa Robinson, who is the District Principal for Learning Framework. As a team, we wish to present to you this evening something that was a collective from our department and sharing with you on a number of areas related to education in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. So our presentation this evening is going to focus in on 3 main areas. And what we're looking at is we'll start off with the foundation as to budget decisions, followed by sharing with you dollar amounts that are attached to our budgets and where they are attached. And in conclusion, we're going to wrap up with allocations as to how we make these decisions that formulate the budget and the budget process that we go through as a department. Before we begin here, I'd like to just again acknowledge and thank this group and also other committees for allowing us to present since the inception of this board. We've had opportunity to share a number of different processes, projects, and different initiatives that our department have been involved in. And certainly some of them you may be familiar with just by the title pages here. For example, we've shared with you on the learning framework for the Department of Learning Services, graduation strategies that we have initiated and work on as a department, foundation skills assessment work, health and wellness initiatives such as comprehensive schools and also mental health initiatives and supports, Aboriginal education, and ADST. So we've had a number of different presentations presented by staff or employees within our department over the past few months. As we begin, it's important for us to share with you and to present to you that our work is really about alignment throughout the district. What we're looking at is the Ministry of Education obviously drives guidelines and procedures for us to work within as a school district, followed by the strategic plan and goals of the board. We have district level initiatives that we work on, and those are presented then into the schools, and the schools also align their work with our department, again moving up to the board, moving up to the Ministry of Education. So it's really important for us to recognize the alignment takes place that way, and obviously at the school level then into the classroom. You're obviously very familiar with these points up here. The mission of the school district, the Nanaimo-Ladysmith Public Schools, together with families and communities, empowers all students to become healthy, confident, lifelong learners and socially conscious citizens. Vision of the school district then, success for all, and the values that the Board of Education has brought forward. And I think we've shared this with you previously, but the values that you put forward as a board are also values that we work on a daily basis to uphold through our department. And we will be referring back to these points, particularly as we get into slide 8 around decision making. So all this to say that with the 4 goal areas that you as a board have put forward, we as a department then are working within that mandate and bringing our work forward on a daily basis. So, fancy spiral there showing us the learning framework. You've seen this before. We had a presentation on this topic. The learning framework then encompasses the 4 areas: curriculum and instruction, assessment and reporting, collaborative culture, and safe, caring, and inclusive schools. All of this surrounds what we're really after is student success. How was this created? This was a construction that was brought forward through the work of teachers, input from principals and vice principals, and it's guided our work as a department since its inception, and we're in the 4th year of implementation. So our decisions then are guided, decisions specifically around budget are guided by these areas here. So you can see we look at things like the beliefs that are put forward, the values of the district, educational research, really important, and you've heard this from us before, demographic information, and as we've shared with you, student data. All are components then that allow us to make evidence-based decisions around how we allocate our budget and the work that we do as a department. I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Eslinger, and he will be speaking further to this slide.
What may look like a rather simple diagram actually is quite deep and involves many, many people. We put the word decision in 4 places on the slide for a reason, that no decision that we make is arbitrary. It is all based on evidence-based practice, educational research, And alignment that Deputy Superintendent was talking about is present in every decision we make. We really focus on team. We in Learning Services are a team, but our team does not end there. Our team is a connection with all of our partners. So our school principals, our teachers, our support staff, and then every other stakeholder in our school district. The point of collaboration can't be emphasized enough. If we're talking about alignment and we're talking about the use of evidence-based practice, we can only do those things through collaboration. With our stakeholders, it isn't one-way communication, it's reciprocity. We talk and we listen. We ask for information and we receive information. So working together is a huge aspect of the decision-making process that we engage in. Triangulation of data is also key in the work that we do. We don't look at one piece, and we certainly can't look at all the pieces we have, so we have to go through a process of making sure that we're using the right pieces. And we're using our data to tell our story, so we're making our decisions based on our needs. So it is specific to us, not what works in a neighboring school district. It's what we need and what works for us here. So again, the beliefs, the values, the data, the educational research, and the demographic information in our school district all inform the decisions that we make. Our superintendent is making a presentation today also, and in that presentation you will hear more about data stories and how we use that data to tell our story.
Thank you, Dr. Eslinger. So what we have before you here then is our budget, a breakdown of our budget for the department. And what we've shared with you is the work around the foundation for our budget decisions. Again, the focus around alignment, collaborative decisions, and evidence-based decision making. If you look then at the area that we have here, this is where our budget comes from. So for our department, we're looking at Aboriginal education, the core work of the Department of Learning Services, elementary programs, and you can see within that then Strong Start, Ready, Set, Learn, Fine Arts, French programs fall within the elementary portfolio. At the secondary level, secondary schools along with Career and Technical Center, Island Connect Education, VAST, and the Woodlands program, the above program that we have at Woodlands, ELL programs, Island Connect Education, and Library Services, and then Inclusive Education, which includes the Learning Improvement Funds, Community Link, and the Learning Services Support Team. So these are budget areas that we have, and we've indicated to you here how we allocate our budgets to each of these areas within our department. Overall, we're roughly $30 million in terms of our budget, and we will outline for you in more detail as to how these budget allocations are set forward. One of the pieces that's important to note, so the core budget there is really us as a department. It doesn't spill out necessarily through the schools. Obviously, initiatives and projects that we're connected to do, but that's the amount of money that as a department that we hold. Everything else is connected directly into schools and students and staffing. You can see then what we've broken this down into is staffing associated with the programs and operating amounts that we use for supplies and other materials, release time, different things like that. Okay, and Ms. Tate is going to be speaking to you about elementary programs and the budgeting in that area.
Just a quick snapshot here. This is just a larger graphic of the elementary budget.
And when we see some of these headings across the top, I just want to draw your attention to something that you'll see in this slide as well as the secondary slide. So these are the funding sources for elementary. We've made a decision within Learning Services to pull the general elementary budget. We've got funding from Ready, Set, Learn, Strong Start, Fine Arts, and Federal French. So, for example, FSL, Federal French funding is K-12. It sits in the elementary budget simply because I oversee that portfolio and I oversee that budget. That's why it's sitting here. And when you're looking at the secondary, it's the same. There may be ELL sitting in the secondary budget, but of course we know ELL is K-12. That portfolio just happens to sit with the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools.
Yeah, I mentioned some of the areas that are connected then with the role, the position of the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary. So you can see the portfolio responsibilities connected there, and also as a budget officer, the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary would be overseeing these areas with this budget amount connected to it. As Assistant Superintendent Tate pointed out, there are areas that you'll see within both the elementary and the secondary portfolios that are K-12, and really what that aligns with is the reporting lines. And for example, through library services, the virtual librarian reports through to the secondary Assistant Superintendent, so that's why the budget line is connected in this area.
As your eye probably caught on the first slide showing the dollar amounts or the funding amounts for each of our areas, you probably noticed that student services or diversity and equity was the largest chunk. Stands to reason that all of these areas are support staff to our 14,500 students in our school district. Some of it is derived from Ministry of Education special needs designations. If you look at that amount, it is certainly not enough of the funding to drive the support system in our school district. Out of operating comes a whole lot more funding to support our students in their learning. Community Link, the majority of it is staffing. Our child and youth family and support workers come out of Community Link, and at this point in time we have about 24 of them funded through that funding envelope. CUPE LIF is another source of funding, and we work collaboratively with CUPE 606 to determine how we're going to spend that money. It is targeted toward our education assistants. Up to this point in time, we've used it primarily for collaboration and ensuring that the time was there for that purpose. Diversity and equity, again, along with the designation funding, goes to support staffing. So all of our itinerant staff, our speech paths, our school psychologists, our elementary counselors, all of our individual resource teachers, deaf and hard of hearing, vision. We have EAs for augmentative communication, EAs for behavior. All of that comes out of this funding envelope.
Aboriginal education funding is generated from the Ministry of Education. We, in September, our students self-identify as being of Aboriginal ancestry. The second component of that is that they have, their parent or guardian has to agree that they will receive enhanced services from the school district. So our $3.4 million generated in the district goes to serve for those students in schools. The staff spread across all of our schools. They're in various roles, from language teachers to Aboriginal EAs to teachers to portions of time of other teachers. We mentioned earlier that there's a system of alignment that goes through. So our learning support team meets weekly. We look at the data that comes in around Aboriginal students. We look at the roles and responsibilities that our staff have in schools that are supporting students. And we make sure that the staff that is generated from the funding for Aboriginal education is aligned with all of those things that are going on in schools. We don't want to be stepping across. We want to make sure that we're maximizing the impact of the staff that we have at every school. And so, as Dr. Esslinger said at the beginning, we spend a lot of time talking about what we have as resources, including Aboriginal education, and we discuss in depth what it is that we're doing so that we, again, maximize that impact for our students.
Clarifying question, just to make sure that I understand your slides, which is when you look
at the slides, these are actual monies spent or budgeted for. These are not, for example, revenue, correct? Like when we look at like the LIFT fund, well, that's a bad example. Diversity and sorry, designations might be a good example. This is the money spent on that slide. It's not the monies received from the government specified for that. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is the money received because of those special needs designations.
So on this, so we spend over and above this.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what these slides were. So again, this is the money received for Aboriginal education.
Correct.
Thank you.
So this is the middle portion of, there's three portions to the presentation. This middle portion is talking about the revenue, the money, funding sources coming in, and then the third section will move into the money spent.
Thank you.
So moving into the money spent is section 3. So we've had a good opportunity, or the deputy has laid the foundation of how we make our decisions, utilizing alignment from school plans to district goals to the ministry. And now we're going to move into the area that will we'll share with you the budget allocations and how and where this money is spent. Not to ignore, but to re-emphasize again that these decisions are based on the beliefs and values of the system, and that there's research and data to support the decisions that are made, and that decisions are not made in isolation. And you have seen and heard this information before. This is the almighty Department of Learning Services Learning Framework. Here it is again. I wanted to take a moment, though, to share with you that in the area of curriculum and instruction, we are going to continue to stay the course and emphasize the BC curriculum, particularly now at the grade 10, 11, and 12 level. At the elementary level, we are well on our way, but the emphasis there will be at the secondary level. We will continue to support reconciliation and supporting the deeper Indigenous understandings of all of our employees. We continue with our K-9 reading focus. The Focus Schools initiative is an example of that. The Focus as well has a larger emphasis on the K-3 as an early intervention. And we are beginning to move more heavily into numeracy. And we're working on our numeracy assessments. And we hope to move towards supporting numeracy here like we have literacy. We will continue to support the use, understanding, creation of district-wide assessments and broaden those. We've gotten really good at the literacy. We're working more on the numeracy now. We are still a member of the reporting pilot, the provincial reporting pilot. And as we are learning more about the secondary provincial assessments, we'll be piloting and then implementing those across our secondary schools. We still have lots to learn. In addition to the reporting pilot, we have lots to learn around ongoing communications of student learning, and so that will remain an emphasis. But we are well on our way in that regard. And at the secondary level, we are continuing to explore the use of My Education BC, the parent portal, and using it as an ongoing communication tool between the school and families. We continue to support our district-wide PLC. At the elementary level, for example, we have 6 learning sessions or 6 district-wide PLC gatherings where we release teams from every single elementary school to come together, to learn together around PLCs and to support one another, for example. We continue to support our collaborative inquiry model as a professional learning model within PLCs, but across all domains of our professional learning. And then we have, as you're aware, many professional learning opportunities that with the support of our learning coordinators and others that we provide. And one example of that is our Meet Learning series. And we continue to support our principal and vice principals understanding around instructional leadership, around all of these components of the learning framework. And a really good example of this notion of collaboration is the committee that's Natsmat Tala, which is a sort of cross-stakeholder committee that focuses on quality professional learning.
We will continue to put our funding towards our work and our efforts to ensure that every child, every student sees themselves reflected in the curriculum and feels that they belong in their school. The broad work that we do in this area is to create a positive school climate and a positive school culture, which will again assist our students in feeling that they belong and that they're appreciated there. The key work that we do in this area continues to be differentiated instruction and universal design for learning. We are doing an appreciative inquiry we started in December of last school year. It will run through this spring and into the fall. When we finish, we will have identified those, I want to call them extraordinary practices that help our schools have created to include all kids, to have students believing that they belong there and that they see themselves reflected in all the work that goes on in the school. So that work we will continue, and as you can see, our focus is always educative, preventative, and restorative.
So the learning framework really provides guidance and sets a path with regards to teaching and learning. And a major component or structural support for that is instructional leadership. And we have had a focus on instructional leadership in our district for a couple of years, and it's carrying us a great distance. And that goes from senior team, district teams, schools, classrooms, where we are supporting one another. We are using best practices, educational research to inform what we do in classrooms. I'll take a moment to just emphasize a key team that we have in the district to support the instructional leadership. It's our team of district learning coordinators. It's a highly effective, highly collaborative team that we have in the district, and you've met many of them over the year that they've presented on a variety of topics here with us. And so we use these learning coordinators to focus on emergent issues in the district, like literacy, reconciliation, for example. They also provide instructional leadership that aligns with school plans, district goals, board goals, ministry mandates like the BC curriculum. And moving forward, we will continue with this model, we will continue with these roles. We are, however, adjusting their job descriptions a little bit to allow us to be more flexible and nimble to meet these emergent needs and to meet the goals of the district. So by broadening and generalizing these job descriptions, it'll allow us to do this and allow us to continue to be flexible and nimble. And so an example of this, to sort of bring it back to a bit of a story, a really good example of this is the notion of collective ownership around our Aboriginal students. So the learning coordinator team on an individual level and a collective level has found their place and space under the umbrella of reconciliation, that every one of these learning coordinators has found their path, has contextualized their work within Aboriginal education rather than it resting, for example, on the shoulders of two learning coordinators who might have it in their portfolio, whereas the rest of these coordinators may not have reconciliation or Aboriginal education in their portfolio or in their job description per se. By broadening these and generalizing these job descriptions, we can allow that work that's already existing, we can allow these job descriptions to align with that work. So I wanted to take a moment just to share that with you. It's quite a proud piece for us.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our presentation, not quite there, but we've had an opportunity to share with you this evening sort of the foundation of our budgetary decision-making, the work that we conduct, and outlining some of the very key initiatives that are supporting our schools and our staffs in the work that they do in instructing our students. Looking here then, we also want to point out to you that we are continuing our focus, and we have shared with you in previous presentation our focus around supporting graduation strategies. We have 6 specific areas up here that are outlined in the each of these shapes, and specifically what we're looking at, early intervention, key initiatives that we have that you're fully aware of. Then again, Strong Start programs in our schools. I believe that we have 8 Strong Start programs. We have Keck College, which is a fabulous partnership in terms of preparing our students as they enter into our schools. We have the Focus School initiatives, and we have, I believe it's 16 schools that are identified to some capacity as being focus schools with initiatives and budget allocations assigned to those schools. And again, we're looking at safe, caring learning environments and inclusive kindergarten practices. If you look at instructional leadership, last year there were budgetary decisions that were made in supporting our principals and vice principals with the work that they do around instructional leadership. Additional FTE was added to our schools in that area. And in supporting our principals and vice principals in their daily work, we are looking at learning opportunities for professional growth, and also continued work with our staff and working with our principals and vice principals around their growth in terms of growth plan areas. Another key initiative that we have spoken to you about and presented, I think early on, was around data analytics and the work that we're doing there. As Dr. Esslinger pointed out, there's a number of different areas that we can draw upon in terms of drawing data to help us make our decisions. But as was pointed out, we have to really be cognizant and hone in on those areas that are going to be most informative, I guess, for us as we make these decisions. So we do have a lot of work that's taking place there, and cross-departmental work that's taking place in that area as well. Graduation strategies, Mr. Cadwallader, he oversees a committee called the Student Success Committee. We've spoken about that in the past. We have a number of district principals who come together to really focus in the discussion around what we're doing as a district to support student success. And we also have taken the steps, and you've heard about this previously, identifying students on an individual basis for the supports that we're looking at, students who may be at risk of failure in some degree and not moving forward, and early identification of these students so we can put strategies and supports behind them to help them be successful. The work that's happening, you're all very familiar with the work around reconciliation, large initiatives happening around curriculum and embedding Indigenous ways of knowing into the curriculum. Looking at our Aboriginal graduation success rates, we have 2 coordinators that are in place helping to support that work, K through 12 in our system. Our Aboriginal Education Department, we have a number of staff members who provide support directly within our schools and directly to students there. And as Ms. Tate has pointed out, collective ownership is something that has been alive. And in our district, when we are interviewing new employees, we're always talking about collective ownership, and it's our collective responsibility to support our Indigenous and Aboriginal learners in our system. And I think encompassing everything, it's important for us to point out as well that inclusion is a driving force for the work that we do. And again, it's an umbrella, encompasses all of our work in the framework that we put forward. So as we prepare to close, I just want to reiterate the following messages, and you have This up here, everything we do in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools allows for dignity, purpose, and options for all of our students. And you know, that is something, I guess a motto that we believe here that ties into our vision of success for all. And in this case, through the Department of Learning Services, for all students. So as we pointed out, we are, as a department, following the course that you, as a Board of Education, have put forward for us. And our work then is based, in terms of our decisions, around collaborative, evidence-based, data-driven, and student-focused decisions. So I wish to conclude and wrap up our presentation, and we're very happy to receive questions. Just by saying hi, Sepka, to you. And again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present before you this evening. Thank you.
I see Ms. McKay, but Mr. Zver had his hand up a while ago, and I want to apologize. I didn't make it clear. Because I didn't take questions during Mr. Zver's presentation until the end, I thought I would be consistent and do it that way for this one too. So, Mr. Zver, your question.
All right. On your budget, you said it's $30 million. Where do the other, I'm just going to use it as that education, teachers fit into? If you're only showing a $30 million budget, learning services, I thought encompassed all of the educational pieces. You talked about specialty, you talked about this. There seems to be a disconnect to the amount of money it costs to run the school. So is that just a given, or is that $30 million mentioned because it's more flexible than the
$30 million is connected directly to the Department of Learning Services. Budgeted amounts that are assigned to schools are fall under the school's budget area itself, so they're separated out from our department.
That's my follow-up. So yeah. $30 million is basically specialty things that you grant throughout the schools as required. They're not, so the schools get their basic teacher, basic lineup, and then that $30 million is for additional requirements to be met.
Yeah, would you like to respond?
I can speak to that, but
yeah.
I think you want to outline, I think, from inclusive education, the parent staff, and the secondary slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Includes a lot of the secondary staff in there.
Yeah, so as Ms. Tate's pointing out, the $30 million might seem like a lot, but when you're looking at all of the specialty programs, so the secondary programs that we had up there, Island Connect Ed, CTC, we can, sorry, looking here, English language, yeah, so all of the programs that you see here, you can see that that's a large portion of the of 30 million that's connected with our department. As, if we go to the next slide, I believe, around inclusive education, obviously a large portion of that budget's attached there. So schools, again, receive their own, their staffing allocations based on student numbers. They receive the money that's provided to them to operate their schools, the programs and supports for students within their schools. What we're looking at is specifically within our department from a district level, the amount of money that's allocated to us as a department to provide supports across the district.
Appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank
you. Ms. McKay, Trustee McKay, and then Ms. Wood.
Thank you. Through the Chair, Hitchcock, the presentation. My question is, where are the Bitmojis?
We thought we'd leave them out tonight.
They were trying to be very serious.
Just thought I'd break the ice a little bit.
Oh, I should say, I think they're coming.
Oh,
maybe ours, but yeah, you're in for a surprise.
Ooh.
Right.
That was it. Okay. Ms. Wood, then Trustee Higginson, then Trustee Bear.
My question is about coordinators. From what I understand, you consider your coordinators to have to be a very effective team, and we used to have coordinators that had a broad job description and we're more generalized, and that model didn't work. So I'm not sure I understand why we want to go back to that model. Apart from, I do understand that we want everyone to be supporting Indigenous learners, and of course we want everyone to be supporting Indigenous learners. So, but why are we changing the model for coordinators?
Well, I think comparing it to the old model, I'm assuming you're referring to the instructional coordinator model. It's not necessarily, I don't believe that the model didn't work. I think the culture and the culture of the system at the time might not have been supportive of that model. And I'll reiterate my response in that it's important that this team works collaboratively, that works cross-departmentally, cross-curricularly, cross-discipline. They're stronger that way, and they can integrate the supports that they provide to the system far better if they're working together. And so when we have very separate and distinct job descriptions, it's important that we stay within that. And by broadening them, we can allow for what's already occurring, which is the strength that they're building and making the connections and working in sort of cross-discipline.
I can give an example of how that transition from previous years has moved into this year. So in previous years, we had Aboriginal education coordinators. This year, those two positions happen to be Indigenous people in them, but they're graduation success coordinators, and it's allowed them to have discussions around math instruction and English instruction and resource development, and allowed them to take part in things that are broader than Aboriginal education, but influence assessment, influence instruction, influence things that are going on beyond the boundaries of what might have been conceived as Aboriginal education in the past. So that's a first step in the direction that we're looking at, is making those job descriptions more general, and again allowing us to be responsive to the things that are coming up, either from the ministry around graduation, 10 through 12 curriculum, or anything else that might emerge as we review the data.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Higginson, then Trustee Barron, then Trustee Stanley.
Thanks. I apologize if this was done already with the board. I did miss December, 2 meetings in December. I don't see on here focus schools. Are we continuing our focus schools?
Yes.
Okay. So are they, how come they're not on here? Because they're like special.
I did mention.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, there was reference made
was
to
there?
Focus schools.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it on here. I apologize for that. So then the follow-up to that is, have we had an in-depth with this board yet on what happens at the focus schools? I know I missed December when a lot of that orientation stuff happens, but have we had one with this board to know what happens in the focus schools and understand the staffing of the focus schools? I see nods and I see no's, so I'm unsure.
I think our Assistant Superintendent Tate wanted to answer
Don't
that.
get me started, because I would love to do that.
But I just wonder, because I think it's a really important budget allocation.
Thank you for mentioning that, and I would love to spend a little bit more time and go in depth with you around the focus schools. And some of the funding that you'll see that goes to focus schools will probably sit in the school's allocation.
Okay.
And then some of it will sit separate, like the reading specialists, for example. Those are districts. So the funding sources for focus schools will come from both.
Okay. Thanks.
If I may add on to that as well, the focus for our presentation tonight obviously is around budget and how we make our decisions within the department. There are a number of areas that we would like to make presentation to the Education Committee on that pertain to the work of our department. So we've had opportunity on previous occasions, and we would like to continue to do so on other areas as we're moving forward.
Okay, Trustee Barron.
Thank you, through the chair.
Okay.
This is really following Ms. Wood's comment and question as well. My question is around the coordinator changes, and thank you for clarifying and giving some further information around that. Because I'm the trustee liaison for the Safe Schools Committee, and in various different capacities, I'm seeing all this great work that's happening with our sexual health coordinators and our social justice coordinator as well, and so on. And so I understand what you're saying around the collective ownership and the ability to work cross-departmentally and all of these benefits of working in that way, but my concern is, and my question is how will these changes, if at all, impact the ability for us as a district to focus on these areas, as a particular to, for example, with the SOGI survey that went out to our SOGI leads in our schools, 41% of those leads said that they don't have enough, they're not satisfied with the opportunities for professional development in learning around SOGI. So there's clearly, that's just one example of what I can think of around, we're not there. I mean, if we were there, then great, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in these areas. So how do we ensure that these coordinators now in these general job descriptions still have the capacity to do the work that needs to be done in the capacity that needs to be done?
And that's our job.
Yeah.
Let's be clear that the focus and the focal areas for the district will remain the focus areas for the district. We spent several slides sharing how we make these decisions, that they're based on educational research, beliefs and values, student data, right? So demographics. That will be how we make all of our decisions. In fact, I would say that when we build collective ownership around these areas of the curriculum, it's a larger workforce. It's a larger force that can, continue to build the instructional leadership and the capacity when that's a shared piece. The leadership is here. You've set, our course, and it's our job to make sure that gets done. We maintain the focus, right? And as I said again, how we choose those focus areas are based on several factors.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to add on to that as well, that as a board, we as a department are working within a status quo mandate for our budgeting, and as Ms. Tates pointed out, there is a lot of thought and a lot of work that goes into maintaining our focuses and ensuring the supports that we feel that are needed based on everything that we've shared with you this evening as to how we make decisions, that those supports and strategies are in place within our schools. And within our mandate, then what we're looking at is we're looking at making tweaks and changes to the work that we do in order to meet the needs that we have identified as a department within our system.
Can I just have a follow-up?
Yes.
So just to clarify, none of these changes mean that we wouldn't have somebody working on the Safe Schools Committee. None of these changes mean that we wouldn't have sexual health still continuing as a focus area. It just means how it's done is going to be changing. Is that right?
That's correct.
Just for clarification?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We're not dropping it.
Okay.
Any of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Stanley? And
Well,
then Mr. Steele?
Trustee Barron kind of stole my question in many ways, so I will just, I'll make a comment and then I'll move on to my next question. Having moved from a different school district, one of the things that impressed me about this school district was in the mission, and I believe someone there else, there's a number of comments about social consciousness and social justice, and I was proud to be part of a school district that had those as identified priorities, like explicit identified priorities. And so, and I'm a sexual health educator myself, and so knowing rates of sexual assault that occurs in our high schools, it's more common than post-secondary, or as common, excuse me. I thought that I was very impressed by that, so I'm glad to hear that those areas of work will still be continuing, because I have to say I was very impressed. I thought it was incredibly progressive. So I find that those mandates or expertise will still be valued or emphasized. So moving on, I guess I want to move to an entirely different topic, since thank you for asking that. With regards to your slide with the light bulb talking about focusing on graduation strategies or the continued work that you're doing, and focusing more specifically on the early intervention aspect. I heard, I kind of want to follow up on a couple of comments that I heard while we're talking about, and I think it was Deputy Superintendent Davies, but correct me please, was talking about, I want to learn more about what was said as early identification strategies. And I'm wondering specifically if you could talk to me just a little bit about, to what extent does that include, like, is that early screening, early assessment? Like,
can you tell me a little bit more about that area? And part of the reason I'm asking, because I think that early intervention screening is really important, but as well, a previous budget presentation talked about, kindergartners coming into our program are not identified. And so that's an area where there might be extra pressures, and it was the NDTA that talked about perhaps getting some extra supports in the kindergarten classrooms early during those trying to figure out things times. So those are my thoughts. Can you talk to me about what you're referencing when you talked about early identification strategies and what that means?
I'm going to take the first attempt at it. We had to package a lot of things to create this presentation for you tonight. So some of the things that you're not going to see spelled out would be the work of our speech and language pathologists in kindergarten or in primary. So early intervention means we also believe in early intervention as a key mechanism in addressing the needs of our kids. So our SLPs are first and foremost in the K classrooms in September doing the work that they do. Along with that, we have our NLPS literacy assessment. Again, starting right in kindergarten, we're focusing on what are the needs, how can this data assist the classroom teacher formatively in creating the learning environment that they need to create in their class. Again, early intervention. We have our Children in Care Committee that we sit on with the Ministry of Children and Family Development, focusing on early intervention strategies, but not just. That one focuses K-12. We want to make sure that all of our students at the upper end, especially grades 11 and 12, are aware of the tuition waiver for post-secondary. But bring that back down to kindergarten, we're focusing right in because we know that's a population of our most vulnerable students. Our wellness centers. We focus our wellness centers at the secondary level. I spent the day today with Island Health, and we are dreaming of wellness center access for our elementary school population and what that could look like. Again, it's not going to be anywhere near what it looks like at a secondary level, but what is early intervention in terms of getting the medical needs or the physical, social, mental health needs at an early intervention level. So those are the ones that come first to my mind to tell you about. There are others.
We have a strong relationship with the Child Development Center and working on transitions into the school system. Another example would be Cat College, which is a preschool early intervention with a target on Indigenous families, vulnerable families, where we bring in all sorts of community organizations to support that, as well as connect with the kindergarten teachers before, during, and after.
If I could chime in again, our response to intervention model is alive and well in terms of early intervention. All of our itinerants, the speech paths, the school sites, the counselors, a focus of theirs is early intervention. Our school psychologists can be hauled into any classroom where a teacher wants another set of eyes, of psychologist eyes, on kids to help them determine what's going on or some things to try. So we have lots of mechanisms like that you can't really put your thumb on to say that's an early intervention, well, it is early intervention practice, but X amount of dollars go to that. So we kind of zoom up and we just tell you about the itinerant staff. That just becomes a function of what they do in our schools.
Some of the data that we review over time also gives us an idea of what has gone on in the past in a certain area, so we can allocate resources to those places like focus schools. Some of that data and the types of data and the sources of them, the superintendent will share at a presentation later this evening.
I kind of wanted to ask a follow-up question, but I really think it's a separate question, so just put me back on the list.
Yeah, you're back on the list.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Now, was it Mr. Steele or Ms. Lee? It was Mr. Steele.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on some of the supports that were mentioned by Learning Services on page 19. So at my school, I had a teacher that retired 2 years ago, and she came out of retirement, got a TOC job, and then stepped into quite a lengthy leave this year. And when she came in discussion with her, it was clear she stepped out for 2 years. This has been an epic 2 years of change. Unbelievable. So when she says, like, what's new? Well, the way you report and assess is new. The curriculum is all new. And the platform that you put your data into, MyFBC, is all new. So it's kind of a shock and awe kind of piece. And when you put that into context, like the fallback, we have things in the district now that other districts do not have. So the Meet and Eat learning series, which you guys have heard of, bringing teachers across the district together to help with this change. PLC is integral, just from my perspective as an administrator, absolutely integral to this. We have the district learning leader meetings, so the learning leaders mix. We used to be like little kingdoms, like Dover didn't talk to ND, didn't talk to Barsby. Now we mix around. We even get to talk to Cedar and Ladysmith and Wellington, so it's pretty awesome that way. And within that, the coordinators have been integral with this. So that physical and health education moved forward far more rapidly than it would have without coordinator help. All the courses have different course codes. Coordinators have helped with that to get it into the mechanism. And I don't think they're unsung heroes, but I think it's important that during this epic time of change that these folks are in place and that they've helped out immensely. So I know from talking to other districts, they don't have these, programs to support this, and I think it needs a good shout out. That's kind of what I have to say.
Just want to check my speakers list. I got Trustee Higginson, Trustee O'Neill, Trustee McKay, and then Trustee Stanley. Have I missed anyone? Okay, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. One point and then one question. You mentioned Keck College, which I just have a mad crush on. I think, like an educational crush, a nerdy educational crush. Do we, knowing, this is just a thought for going forward, I think, and we were just talking about this earlier, that we're going to start to see more childcare and stuff brought under the portfolio of education. Do we collect data on the success of those students? Because we've been doing that program for long enough that I think there could probably be some trends. This is not my question, I'm just, and if we don't, we should.
That was a question.
There's my point. If we don't, we should. If we don't, we should. The end, that's my point. Okay, here's my actual question.
I did too.
So, I do want to just circle back around to this learning coordinator stuff, because I'm just trying to make sure, like I also have a crush on them. You know, they come out and they show us all this awesome stuff they're doing, right? And so I'm just, one of the things that I really love is having people who have expertise, because I find, you get a jack of all trades and a master of none. So will we still have, like Mr. Steele just talked about the assessment, and we have these amazing assessment coordinators with an amazing amount of knowledge in these areas. So will we still have people who have an area of expertise?
Okay, nobody has a bigger crush on learning coordinators than I do.
I don't know. Okay.
Can I just give you a little example, and then I'll try to, if you need me to, I will try to attempt to answer that again. For a little while in this district, I sort of felt like I represented Aboriginal education. I was that person. I was the go-to person. A lot of that portfolio, all of the components of that rested on my shoulders, either literally or figuratively. At least that was my perception. And in a very short period of time, that is so no longer the case in any way, shape, or form. Because if I were to leave this district, and with these questions, if I were to leave
just wait.
If I were to leave this district being that sole person, what would happen? Right? We don't want to have necessarily the responsibility of one particular focus area or goal area resting on the shoulders of one person. We need this expertise. Absolutely we do. And we will continue to build and nurture this team to explore and to grow that expertise. We need that expertise, absolutely, but we need to be respectful of these job descriptions. Whereas if we have a primary assessment coordinator, they're locked into that, and we need to be respectful of that. And to be contributing to other areas of the framework can be challenging. So it's important that we're respectful of that, and if we generalize these, we still want to harness their expertise, but we want them to be flexible with their passions and with their own learning as well, because they can grow in other areas and they can foster their own learning in some of those areas.
Okay, Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you. So I think through the chair, I'll just follow Trustee Higginson's lead here and try to squeeze into. I have one. This might be like dumb question of the evening question. Or I may have missed it. The DSL core pool of funds for initiatives reserves. I hope someone could explain that a little bit to me. And then I just wanted to ask about, so the Aboriginal education piece, and we had that great presentation last time we met on the tripartite agreement, and I'm just in my mind trying to draw the connections and how that works. So I really like how this is all laid out, and if I'm following this right, the Aboriginal education piece, that's for those that self-identify. They also have to be status. Okay, thank you. And then this, I guess, is fluid because this money would then follow the student. So it could be a bit in secondary, a lot in. Can you maybe expand on that piece for me, please?
Let me jump to that one first. Okay. So any student, when they register in the school district, has the opportunity to self-identify as being of Aboriginal ancestry. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be status First Nation. They can choose not to. Mm-hmm. For example, my two children identified as Aboriginal ancestry when they were attending school years ago. They weren't status. They didn't live on reserve. They were a long ways away from where I grew up. Mm-hmm. But they were of Aboriginal ancestry. So that funding, then a letter goes home to their parent or guardian, mm-hmm. outlining what the enhanced services are because they identified as being of Aboriginal ancestry. And then a parent agrees or doesn't agree for them to receive enhanced services. If they agree, then that funding is generated to the district. It doesn't generate to the student, it generates to the district, which provides us an opportunity to then use all of those pieces of that light bulb to decide on how we're going to allocate that funding and where it's going to be allocated and how it's going to be allocated. So again, some of it goes to Hul'qumi'num language instruction, some of it goes to support staff, some of it goes to teaching staff, some of it goes to administrative staff.
Okay.
The BCTEA is quite far removed from that as a funding source.
Okay.
So that's federal funding generated to status First Nation students on reserve. So to show you the difference, that BCTEA funding is focused at just over 200 students. The targeted funding is generated by about 2,300 students. The targeted funding is $1,230 per student this year. Next year it will increase. The BCTEA funding we would receive would just be what we would generally receive for a student in this district, generally around $8,000 per student. So,
can I add that a child can self-identify at any time, not just when they come into the district.
Yeah.
So when we sometimes we'll see jumps in that population, it's not because we have a ton of kindergarten kids coming in necessarily, but I believe that students throughout this journey and feeling what they feel in this district and that sense of belonging are identifying later on down the road. And then this permission from the parent or guardian, that is something that is done every year anyway. So a child has the opportunity to self-identify or pull themselves off the list. And it's only those students who identify and have permission that will receive services, and then that generates funding.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Trustee McKay and I've got Trustee Stanley.
Sorry, I believe there's a second part to this question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chantal.
So going back to this slide here, the DLS core. So what it says, pool funds for initiative reserves. And I'm going to use a finance department term, which hopefully it's not taking it fully out of context, but the way I would view this is that these are restricted funds for our department, so not within the term restricted as the finance department might use, but for our department they are. So we've got initiatives, it's not a slush fund for our department, it's actually targeted money toward different initiatives. I'll give you an example. Elementary track and field meets are coming up, starting now, working their way through probably into early June. And with that then, the City of Nanaimo owns the track. The Nanaimo Track and Field Club is the, they have a agreement with the City of Nanaimo for running the track, and we as a district then use the track, and so there's a cost to that. So we have money set aside to support the district. So it's just district-wide initiatives that we're supporting. Things like NS3. So we had a presentation, I believe, last week from NS3. There are money that, dollar amounts that are put forward to have these initiatives through NS3 in our school district. As a department, we are paying to support those types of initiatives. Things like nonviolent crisis intervention. So we have training throughout our district, and we have money within that fund then to support release for teachers and support staff throughout our district to go to that training, or also to pay for the trainers to come into our district. Through Ms. Robinson, the Meet and Eat initiatives, you know, it's a great initiatives that are happening, but there's a cost to that. So this would be where we have funds to support those initiatives. You know, so I mean, I can go on and keep listing them, but those are the kind of things that we take care of with that particular budget area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And my apologies for that, Trustee O'Neill. I do have Trustee McKay and Trustee Stanley, and I want to be cognizant of time, so this is like a last call for the speakers list. Anyone who hasn't spoken, Trustee Wilkinson, will you ask him to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay, Trustee Wilkinson. Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Trustee Robinson, where's your hand up? Okay. Trustee McKay.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was one of those that self-identified my children late. So that's how that happens. Could you clarify, I have a question that sort of sparked from Trustee Stanley's question earlier about early interventions. Would that not also include things like the NLPS reading assessment, E23, those types of, like, more educational as opposed to sort of assessments?
Absolutely.
Yes.
The entire Focus Schools initiative is an early intervention initiative.
Running the EDI in our school district is an early intervention.
Building the Island Numeracy assessment for those, sorry, we can.
Yeah. Thank you.
Trustee Stanley.
And I'm here to soak it all up, so please, just, thank you. I do very much appreciate your time and your willingness to answer our questions, because they really help us better understand what we do here and what you do here, and so we can, you know, not only speak about that publicly, but, you know, think about potential funding considerations too. So I do appreciate your time and efforts in this. I'm going to switch to my other side, which is that data nerd of me, and I've been spending a lot of time with the, what is it? The thought something?
Thought
exchange. Responses from the strategic planning, and looking through all, literally written down every single response. And one thing that has come up somewhat consistently, it's not like one of the big categories, but the response to intervention has actually come up a number of times. So I don't know if it's you guys, and you've set people to say things on there, but I am wondering.
As long as it's positive.
Yeah. There were some, what I thought were really interesting comments and or good suggestions on that. And I can't remember them exactly, but one of them was talking about, you know, sorry, my thoughts went to different sides. One was wanting to assess the RTI, like assess the success of the RTI program, and can we use that as a feedback loop? So I thought that, because you mentioned data, I think, Mr. Cadwallader, but I'm also aware that we've had conversations about looking at, you know, an emphasis on data analytics. Can you tell me, do we have the space, time, capacity, resources to evaluate our response and intervention, I don't know what to call it, program? Tactic?
Through the chair, if I could jump in. So first of all, we look at RTI as a framework.
Framework.
Or even, I call it a graphic organizer, nothing more. something we hinge the work on. The work is our assessment, our PLCs, our collaboration, all of that is the work. RTI is just a graphic organizer. So collaboratively, we created a survey with the NDTA exec last year, and before that, the NDTA had sent out a survey of their own prior. So we have the joint survey data, and it informs us well as to where the understanding is about response to intervention and how it works, and where we need to do more work. So we look at the response to intervention framework as our foundational work. We will always need to be talking about it, explaining it, but of course doing the work. Sometimes weeks go by and we don't actually ever say RTI because it's collaboration time. It's our assessment, it's formative assessment, it's all of the instructional practices that we're using. That's the work of RTI. So sometimes I think our surveys or our questionnaires are lost on people who are actually doing it, but don't view it under the framework or the guise of response to intervention.
I ask because I think from a budgeting perspective, evidence-based, I know you all talk about evidence-based services, supports, whatever, all the time, but I also think that we need to make evidence-based decisions.
Right.
And so I throw that question out because I will seek repeatedly as much evidence/data/information that you can give. And I think that those are kind of important areas for us to kind of look at. And I know,
The effect size for response to intervention as a framework is very high.
Sure. Okay.
So it is an evidence-based strategy for hooking or anchoring these mechanisms and these processes, these pieces into our learning framework.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esslinger and Trustee Stanley. I'm going to have the superintendent
just wanted to
follow up.
right? Because I think this idea of RTI can be confusing for people sometimes. Bob, so answer me this question, Dr. Esslinger, through the chair. We said we're not doing RTI anymore, starting next year. Would our practices change?
No.
Okay.
It's a graphic organizer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Wilkinson, and then Trustee Robinson, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Thank you, through the chair. I just have a quick question about the ABED funding. So when students check the box, right, and then the letter goes home, you had talked about the funding being more general funding, like that it goes into the pot. Is that made clear with the letter? Like, I'm just thinking of if parents got a letter home and didn't feel like their kids were in need of certain services, but if they knew that it was funding for a general pot that would benefit and that we could actually get that funding for that student, that they might be more inclined to say, yeah, let's do that. Is that...
I'm not sure if that's allocated or that's articulated in the letter.
It's not.
So
is it allowed to be?
Well, I get to write the letter, so it might be helpful. I'd have to think about that, whether it would be helpful or not. I knew that my students didn't need any direct support, but I also knew that if they did, that person was at the school in case things went sideways for them, that they knew who my
So you
children
said yes
were.
to that
So
service.
I said yes, but I also ran that program for that school district, and so I was knowledgeable about it.
Trustee McKay, is this related to?
Yes.
Okay.
If you mark it no, somebody calls you and have a conversation about it and you find that out.
All right, Trustee Robinson.
Just a brief comment. This is my 8th time through this process. Especially over the last few years, time after time after time, all staff presentations, and especially the ones around budget. And I can't say that that's my area of expertise. In fact, it isn't. But your presentations are getting stronger, more thorough, almost entertaining.
Almost entertaining.
And I just want you to know how I appreciate that I'm understanding where we're going, and it's very obvious. This presentation wasn't thrown together last night at a meeting at 10:30. There's a lot of brains went into it, a lot of thought, a lot of discussion, and you do a great job for us every year, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I too want to echo that I greatly appreciate the presentation and the way you've laid it out. I appreciated the level of detail in the data. Now, I may not necessarily agree with everything, and I'm still processing some of what you've said. Regardless of that, the quality and the caliber of the way you've explained it was excellent. So thank you. And I was going to ask a question or make a further comment, but given the time, I won't. And what I may do is I may miss Tate, give you a call and just clarify some things. So for my own understanding, thank you very much. All right, so thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And now Mr. Saywell is going to give a report.
Except for you, Scott.
Ooh. Stale what? Ooh. Yuck. I don't like milk when it's not stale. I hate milk. I hate milk. I hate it more than I hate water. I'm not a fan of water. I love water. I don't know why. Well, I like it with lemon in it. I can drink it with lemon, but plain water, I can't drink it.
Don't take it personally, Scott.
Sorry. Do you want some water? No, I'm good, thank you.
I could use chocolate.
Oh, me too.
Good night, Scott.
Coming out?
Bring in donuts instead. Oh my God. Where's my bread? Can't get better than that. No.
Am I okay to begin? Should I pause another second?
Yeah, just give everybody one more sec to. All right. Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Okay, Trustee Robinson, we want to get started again, if we could. Oh, still waiting for Trustee O'Neill too. I didn't realize that.
Tell people that.
It's okay. I just want to make sure we get done it by 9.
Am I good to go? I was just looking for a nod or something.
Okay, I'm going to call us back into order. Excuse me. All right, Mr. Saywell, I will give you the floor.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Mr. Steele just whispered to me, you better be entertaining, so I'll do my best. You've been handed a district review story. So with Learning Services presentation, that marks the end of the budget presentations by all of the staff, including all the separate departments, as well as NDTA and CUPE. So what I aim to do this evening is, as you go into those budget deliberations, a special year for us, of course, a status quo budget. So typically you'd see with the different departments either additions to the budget, or we would be in bad times deleting some positions in the budget. But we're status quo, so some things to consider. I think we've mentioned that we started a learning alternatives program at VAST, which would be in the budget. We have community school coordinators to consider, as well as we added in the amended budget a number of positions earlier this year. So those are already additions to the budget, should we not do anything. The district review story is in line with what schools do. So they have school plans, and at the end of the year, I'll show you on another slide, that they will be presenting their school review story. So we're going to start this year doing a district review story. And well, let's go. So this slide, I think you've seen this before. I've shown it a couple times in different places, but just an overview of the district. Almost 15,000 students now, 27 elementary schools, 7 secondary schools, a DL school that has about 450 full-time equivalent students, over 2,200 employees now, 126,000 people in our district, and a budget that's a little bit old, so the overall budget's a little bit bigger than that. The big news in the last number of years is that we're increasing the student body. The little part at the top has been separated in red is the DL program, and that started in 2004, 2005. But you can see a high point was 1999. We were just under 18,000 students, and now we're just below 15,000. This, I gotta stay near the mic, sorry, Dale. The graph on the bottom shows enrollment over time. So you can see since about 2014, the graph starts heading upward. We've had about 1,200 students since 2014 enter our system, and the prediction is that we will continue to grow, albeit a little bit less next year, about 85 students. This just breaks down for you what's in each grade. It's about 1,100 students per grade. You can see on the right-hand side, Indigenous students, 2,587. That's 17.5% of our student population. Provincially, it's about 11%. So we're quite a bit higher than the norm. The students with special needs, a little bit lower than the norm as a district average. Socioeconomic information, and I have another slide that shows this perhaps a little better with the EDI. This information is just clipped out of some information that the ministry provides us. You have it in your package, but you can see provincial rates for things like percent of 15 to 24-year-olds receiving employment insurance. The provincial average, and as Nanaimo goes, we're always a little bit higher in these areas of vulnerability. And the bottom, some income. Province, 91,000 per family, 77,000 in Nanaimo, so a little bit less. This is the EDI information that Dr. Eslinger spoke to. This has been, we've been doing this since 2001. This is the 6th wave, which covers 2014 and 2016. This gives a general overview of the vulnerability in our district. And it's measured on these 5 areas: physical health, well-being, social competence, emotional maturity, language and cognitive development, communication skills, and general knowledge. And it is the percent vulnerability of children in one or more scales, in one or more areas, that you get a percent vulnerability. You can see it in your package that, and the 53% is the highest in the province, and 9% is the lowest. You can see in the north end 27%, and then you can see in the south end, Harewood area, 46% vulnerability. Again, that is children with 2 or more of these scales. So as the province goes, we're again relatively vulnerable in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. This is a repeat of what Learning Services presented, which is just an alignment between the Ministry of Education's plan for student success, our own strategic goals, our 4 goals, that leads into the NLPS learning framework, that leads into the school plans. So in the NDSS plan, purpose is not that you can read it here, but of course. But I can tell, well, I have Mr. Steele right here, maybe he'd tell us. But these plans fall in line really well with our district plan. The ND plan speaks to the new BC curriculum, assessment, collaborative inquiry, inclusion, and reconciliation. So you will be seeing, I think it's on the, right after this slide, I'm going to explain the enhanced student learning, the framework for enhanced student learning. This is an idea that the ministry went to a couple years ago. So we used to do enhancement agreements for Aboriginal education, and we used to do an achievement contract for school districts. We had on top of that a strategic plan that really didn't sit well, and lots of districts were moving to that. We were one of the first. And so what the Ministry of Education said, that we're going to move to this framework for enhanced student learning that removes some of those past accountability documents, but we are going to pay attention to strategic plans in districts, school plans, and a framework, that's the next slide, for including the public in those plans. So as you saw over the last little while that we included the NDTA and the QP in their presentations, you'll consider those in your as you develop the budget for next year. This is our NLPS framework for enhancing student learning. So you can see in September we confirmed the operating budget here in the lower right. In October the school plans get created. December we look to an amended budget. January we start the amended budget mid-year strategic spending based on budget strategies. So we did add some positions into the amended budget this year around that time. And then February, March, where we are right now, I'm going to report on you exactly what I'm doing right now. Staff will report on how we're doing, and then we'll align all of that in a renewed commitment to a vision aligned, 3-year vision aligned to the strategic plan. At the end of the year, you can see April, May on the top left, the board budget process, and then May, June, school reports, budget strategies based on that alignment of district goals and the budget, and then the budget process including data from surveys, staff and partners input, data-informed alignment with Ministry of Education and board goals. At top in the center, this is the stuff that we're doing all the time, right? PLCs that were referenced this evening, the collaborative work we do, the district committee work, which is what the budget committee this evening, that all is in continuing work, alignment with goals, and of course quarterly reviews. Well, there's the emoji, I guess.
There is.
That, by the way, is the medicine wheel that aligns with our CEYETSES policy. This is here because as we move into creating a strategic plan, we've said already that this is part of the plan. So that's why I put this in this slide. So, indicators of success. I can tell you that while we're transitioning from achievement contracts to school plans and strategic plans at the district level, we haven't done a very good job of including indicators of success in our plan. And we're at various stages of that, I think, throughout the province. Some districts have done a better job than we have. We're starting that work as the board goes through the strategic plan that leads to what will be the school district's organizational plan. So these are some of the things that I'm going to show in the next few slides. So typically the measure of success is around academic achievement. So our grad rate typically, or literacy plans at the school level. But we have to include all of these other elements: social emotional development, physical and mental health, creativity and innovation, citizenship and democracy, and school climate. These are all great measures of how well our students are doing. They're just a little bit more difficult to reduce to a number, right, in a quantitative way. So, over the next few slides, I want to share some of the data that we have in the district. District Principal Lisa Robinson presented not so long ago on the Foundation Skills Assessment data. I'm not going to dig into it, just to say that it's here. And so this is the grade 4 results. On the top left are the participation rates that, again, Lisa Robinson spoke to. Reading on the top right, writing bottom left, and numeracy on the bottom right. The graph that is blue is the province, and SD68 is in orange. Emerging on the left, on track in the center column, and extending on the right. So you can see how we compare with the province as a whole. Similarly, with the grade 7 Foundation Skills Assessment results, the most recent results, November 2018, you can see the participation rates, grade 7, 68% in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools on the top left. Again, writing, top right, numeracy, bottom left, and reading, bottom right, province and school district 68. The Student Learning Survey is another great resource that we have. Learning Services spoke to our sort of data-driven decision-making. This is great information for us. The Student Learning Survey was the satisfaction survey a couple of years ago. Grades 4, 7, 10, and 12, right? Along with parents and staff. It's administered annually since 2001 and provides us some great data. Dr. Eslinger yearly brings this data to the attention of principals and vice principals, as well as the Learning Services Department, and we use this data to inform where we allocate resources, as we have with in lots of ways. Lots of different ministries use this, and Ministry of Health and others use this information as well. So, I picked out a few questions, 4, 7, 10, and 12. Grade 10 and 12 have, I believe, 81 questions, 73 questions in grade 7, and a little bit fewer in grade 4. And so this is a comparison with the province as a whole, and NLPS to the question, is school a place where you feel you belong? The right-hand columns, the 3 right-hand columns, are sometimes, many times, and all of the time. No response is the shortest column there, don't know, and at no time. So you'll see over the next few slides that in every single question, we're comparable with the province's results, which doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a need to be concerned about students answering some of these questions. Are you satisfied school is preparing you for post-secondary education? Again, to the right, sometimes, many times, all of the time. That's in grade 12. At school, are you being taught about Aboriginal peoples in Canada? This one's a little interesting. Maybe I'll comment a little bit in that if you look at the column that is many time, we're typically a little bit below the province in most of the areas we measure. I don't know if it's significant, but we're significantly higher, higher than normal at least, which gives me some indication that perhaps we're doing a pretty good job at teaching kids about Aboriginal people in Canada. You could conclude that. Finally, I continue to get better at reading. Again, sort of on par, more or less, with provincial results. Oh, sorry, one more. At school, are you learning ways to become more creative? I included this question in my presentation because it's something we hear from employers, that they're looking for kids who are adaptable and creative, and it's certainly one of the core competencies that we're trying to teach in schools. This is a snip from the mental health dashboard. I wanted to share this with you because the Ministry of Education is getting better at how they share information with school districts. So this is a dashboard that is available to us, and this you can see in the column to the right that says mental health overview. So the ministry provides this as a mental health overview to districts. And what they do is they group a number of questions that are supportive factors, you can see on the left, supportive factors on the right, and then risk factors. So they're all the questions from the student learning survey, but they are grouped in a way that provide the school districts information around specifically questions that would be supportive in mental health, as well as risk factors that we should be aware of. In the final box, you'll see across group comparisons. The rest are, you can access individual questions from this dashboard, and you can do grade level comparisons. This is a cross-group comparison to the question that is given to grade 4s and grade 12s, which is, do you feel welcome at your school? So I show this again as a snip from the mental health dashboard because this is a question I'm sort of interested in at an early grade level, and then as students are leaving school. Again, might give us cause to be concerned, but and again, we mirror what the province results are almost perfectly. So 79% of grade 4s say that they feel welcome at school, and that's similar to provincial results, and exactly 64.1% in the province, and in NLPS in grade 12 say they feel welcome at school. So somewhere along the lines, a number of students are feeling less welcome from grade 4 to grade 12. You could ascertain. So here's, I guess, in some people's minds at least, our greatest measure of success. This is our 6-year graduation rate. I made comparisons with all of the districts on Vancouver Island, and so you can see the Vancouver Island average on the right, separated by each district in the middle, and the BC average on the far right, and NLPS on the left. So our 6-year graduation rate is 79.4%. It's a little bit higher than that, 80.5% if we exclude all the evergreen students who graduate with an evergreen certificate, which becomes a negative element in our grad rate, and probably shouldn't. So you can see that we're a little bit above the island average, which is 76.9, but significantly, I would say, below the BC average. 6-year Indigenous grad rate, of course, we jumped by 10% from 16-17 to 17-18. Again, a little bit above our island average, and a little bit below the BC average. 6-year ELL, English Language Learners graduation rate. Again, a little bit above the Vancouver Island average and significantly below the BC average. And we've had a number of conversations in the Learning Service Department about why that may be. The ELL, by the way, graduation rate for the province is 1% below their regular grad rate, which is 88.6%. And finally, the 6-year special needs grad rate, a little below both the Vancouver Island average and the BC average. So that's kind of what the data is showing us. But I have this slide because there are lots of stories in the district over the last year that we like to tell. I just went on the district Twitter site and I just clipped all the stories, more or less since September, sort of the good news stories about the district. From the top left, the stuff we're doing about with NLPS Ed Talks. Below that, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but below that is the work we're doing at Learning Alternatives, who are helping to refurbish portables with the teaching staff and QP staff. Top right, of course, is Ecole Hammond Bay and the minister being involved in the grand opening. Just beside that one is that's me, actually, I think, saving a point for our team in the volleyball game that the minister was involved in. Top left, below the minister speaking there, is the Premier's Awards for Teaching Excellence. Of course, we had 3 candidates who were finalists, and out of 9 categories, we had two candidates, 2 out of 9 win awards for teaching excellence. That's magnificent. The Inspire Award for work we're doing that was led by Ms. Tate around collective ownership. I particularly like this one because it happened at the beginning of the year, but just below that is Trustee Stanley's comment on her Twitter site. We need to make the positives so loud that the negatives are impossible to hear. And I often wonder and that creates a culture, right, of telling stories and sharing all the success. I wonder what that does to improve success in the district. I know it does a lot. Barsby, I have to mention, BC High School's cross-country champions. Very bottom in the middle is a great event where the BC Principals and Vice Principals Association came to Nanaimo. Maybe you can see it in your package a little better, but that's Lolly Good doing the traditional welcome, and that's Lawrence up there as well. So some of our Indigenous knowledge keepers were involved in that event. There's so much good. Nanaimo Business Awards. Tomorrow, a big deal. We're a finalist for the most inclusive employer in Nanaimo. That's a big deal. Talking about social justice advocates and our goal for our main goal this year has been around inclusion, right, in the Learning Services Department. So lots of good stuff we're doing, and we forget about the stories when we look at the numbers sometimes. So I wanted to make mention of that. And of course, bottom right, before I move on, Trustee Keller and Superintendent Saywell playing guitar with at an education committee meeting with some students. Trustee Keller was a little off on some of this stuff. Better guitar player than I am. Finally, you know, we don't do this work alone. It takes a village. It does. And so it's kind of the last slide to shout out to all of our partners who help in this work. And I've forgotten some for sure, but these are all the organizations that help us succeed. So I wanted to make mention of them. That's the last slide. Thank you. Just to this document, this has draft on the front, and we will be doing a yearly document which is really a how are we doing story. I thank the communications department for putting this together out of my slide presentation to let the community know where our challenges are, where our successes are, and where we're putting our resources so they can understand it. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to sit down if you have any questions, but thank you.
All right, do we have questions? I saw Trustee O'Neill, and I have a comment and a question, but you go first and then Trustee Barron.
Okay, so two real quick ones, I think. One is around, first of all, thank you, and I appreciate the surveys. So this is in the context of the surveys that students do. Do we do a post-grad survey of students from the district? Because I feel like in a little bit, we don't know what we don't know, right? So it's fair enough to say, am I prepared for, or do I feel as though I'm prepared for post-secondary? What, to me, would speak volumes is if we actually knew what happened to them 2 years out.
We don't. Mm-hmm. I've been asked that question before, and we did some work through a Student Success Committee that I chaired, probably 8 or 9 years ago. And we were trying to get a hold of students who didn't graduate. So we had a non-completers list, and we were trying to contact every student. In some cases, students, don't want to go too much on a tangent to answer your question, but some students, they don't graduate because they write the English provincial exam, they don't pass the exam, and then they don't pass the course. But in some cases, they never know. So we wanted to contact students and let them know they actually didn't graduate. It's really difficult to get a hold of students a couple years out. We have some fairly good information around students who go on to a post-secondary education, and I know I wouldn't want to put our Director of Instruction on the spot, but being with the Ministry of Education for a number of years, I know they look into that data. We have that data locally as well. Can I put you on the spot about that?
Certainly, yeah. We, a number of years ago, started to transition, our post-secondary started to transition and track our students by personal education number. So our PENS transitioned into post-secondary. So we could look at that. And it's that data set is getting more and more valid over the years, the deeper it gets. So I think it's about 4 or 5 years deep now. Okay. So we can look at transitions into post-secondary. We can look at what types of post-secondaries the students have gone to. We can also now start to look at transition to trades and employment. And so some of that survey data is produced in a draft report for the first time last year by Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Trades. So if you'd like, I could try to track down what the most recent version of that document would be. It's provincial, so it doesn't just track our kids. Superintendent Saywell, myself, Ms. Robinson, And our Director of IT are in Victoria next week to meet with the ministry around data and what kinds of things that we would like to know. So certainly we can put that on the agenda in our conversation with them about the types of things that we would like access to at our fingertips rather than relying on them to provide that to us.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Trustee Barron? Oh, did you have anything else?
I did, but just put me back on the list.
Okay, putting you back on the list.
Yeah.
Trustee Barron?
I also have two questions, but I'll ask one now and then be put back on the list at some point. My question was around the 6-year graduation rates that you were talking about our school district's graduation rate being lower than it actually is because we're not taking into account, is it the international student rates that makes it appear lower than it really is? Is it something along those lines?
I don't, yeah, the ministry is now providing a number of grad rates, but certainly I'm really appreciative of them showing the resident grad rate. I'm not sure why they show the non-resident grad rate, but our non-resident grad rate is quite low because students from internationally don't come here to graduate. Right. So our overall grad rate is 71.2% or something like that. I just don't pay attention to it anymore because it's not a clear indication of our success.
Okay, so I guess what I was wondering is how that compares to the other stats in the other districts. So you're saying the 79.4, is that taking into account?
That excludes all of the international students.
It excludes them, so it's actually
Correct.
the higher.
Correct.
You don't look at the lower one.
Yeah.
And is that the case with all the comparables here as well?
I'm
It's the
comparing
same.
apples to apples.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll ask my other question after.
I'll just clarify a little more. Depending on the district, some small districts have huge international student populations. And so it's really misleading. In some cases, their grad rate can be below. Saanich is a pretty good example. Lots of students there. The grad rate's over 80%, I believe, but if you add all the international students, it's 70%. So you get a 10% change. It's misleading.
Thank you. Okay, Trustee Robinson.
Yeah, just a follow-up to Trustee O'Neill's question about following up with grads. John Blaine, former superintendent, is working now, and Deb Marshall, former principal at Barsby, and I are working with him to create School District 68 alumni. So we will be working at making and continuing contact, which will make it obviously easier to follow up with questions to those grads.
Thank you.
And I do have a second comment for later.
Okay, Trustee Stanley.
I'm looking at the mental health dashboard, acknowledging that in two specific questions, one in the risk factors, one in the supportive. Question 21. I acknowledge that it's a problematic question because bullying and teasing could potentially be entirely two different things. So, but let's assume that it's very negative experiences. We're looking at 47.3% are in the negative realm, and then also looking at the in the supportive factors. I'm learning how to care for my mental health. About 50% rounding up is, we're not learning that. So to me that speaks, in the realm of socio-emotional learning and some work that we can do. However, my question is this: do we have provincial data? Because I don't know how well that compares to provincial data. And is that, on par with provincial average, or is that, is that something going on here? I'm not saying necessarily need it now, but could we, when it would be useful to have comparative information. Do we have access to that for this data?
We do, yeah. As I mentioned in the presentation, the intent of this slide was to show you what we have as a mental health dashboard and what information is available to us, and I can absolutely get that information for you. But yeah, for this evening, I want to show you what's available to us as we go through our strategic plan into an operational plan. What sorts of things we should measure.
And I'm really glad that you're bringing this up. I think there's some great data on this, and so I'm really glad that we're, you're already using it, and, you know, thank you, and let's do more.
Okay, before I get to people who are our second speakers, Trustee McKay, Trustee Wilkinson, Trustee Higginson, do you have any questions? Okay. Okay, going back to Trustee O'Neill.
I think mine's more of a comment and a follow-up to Trustee Stanley, and so something we can look at another point. I was curious about the mental health dashboard and the correlation between that and the vulnerability slide map that shows sort of where we have higher populations of vulnerable students. So not really expecting answers, but hopeful that we're able to actually focus in on some of those responses, see if there's a correlation, and be able to provide specific supports if there is a correlation to those communities.
Yeah, I'll just respond through the chair. That, of course, in those areas, that's where we have all of our focus schools located, so we're resourcing those schools more heavily in those areas.
Trustee Higginson, Trustee Higginson, is that related to?
Yeah, but I'm happy to just wait my turn.
Okay. Trustee Barron.
Yes, processing that comment. I just was wondering if you could, I don't think that I've ever heard, maybe I missed it, clarification around how the student learning survey is actually implemented, because for me that speaks to how much I put weight in results, to be honest. For example, did you say there were 73 questions?
Yes, correct.
Because I know that I would have a much more tainted perspective by question 70 than on question 1. I just, in grade 7, I hate this. You know?
They all
I just
true.
Or like, I do a pattern from my son in grade 6, sitting for 73 questions.
So I was just wondering, how is this survey implemented? And I wanted to confirm that you in fact said 73 questions. Is that?
Yes.
Is there a prize?
Well, I haven't shown much in the way of longitudinal data here, but we have it. And that's where that would come into play, of course. As I say, Dr. Eslinger has been king of the student learning survey for quite some time, so he can jump if he wishes. We can add questions, we can delete questions as well. So we own this, but yeah, here are the 73 questions in grade 7. What it does is it creates a conversation for us in learning alternatives to consider as we resource schools.
All right, thank you. Trustee Robinson, then Trustee Higginson.
Following up on Trustee Stanley's quote that was celebrated by our superintendent, I noticed that grade 4 FSAs compared to grade 7, we were coming a lot closer. Extended, we were tied with the province at 9%. And then a lot of the stuff for grade 12, I noticed, were a lot closer to the provincial average than we were at grade 4, which would indicate that we're doing a good job. We've had some cards dealt to us that are challenging, and we're doing a pretty darn good job. Would you agree?
I'll just respond to that. Yeah, that assessment is for formative purposes, right? It informs what we do in classrooms, and you know, I'm hesitant in a lot of ways to compare, you know, with the province. And it, you know, it's by the way, it's a good assessment and it's good information, but I would never hold students to a test that they did on a particular day, right? And that's why we have to look at the broad range measures of success, and success can be a lot of things. And I provide the information so that we can have a conversation about the data, right? That will inform what we do with resources. But yeah, in comparison, not bad.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Higginson and then Trustee Keller.
Thanks. You mentioned at the beginning that this is new for us, that we're kind of just delving into this. So if I may offer some feedback. What I would love to see in this, once we do print this out, is, and maybe we're not there yet, but what I would really like to see is sort of the 5-year report. Where we were, where we are, where we're going, and in particular, where we were, what we did to inform our decision-making, what we're doing to inform our decision-making. You know, it's about an accountability measure for particularly the board and our only sole employee. And it also goes to the notion of continuous improvement. So perhaps it's too soon because this is our first one. But I think it would be really great for us to show this as a long-term like demonstration of continuous improvement, and also shows where we, you know, where it might show where we took a try at something that it didn't work, so it will also show that we're able to be nimble and respond. So I would like to see us move towards, over time, having this be more of a, instead of just a one-year shot, we're having the information where people can see where we're improving and what we've done to improve that. And I think that'll also help us inform our own practice as we go forward, sort of what have we been doing. I know you guys are keeping track throughout what we're doing that works and doesn't work, but I think it also is good for the public to be able to see what we're doing that works and doesn't work.
Yeah, during that, I'll just respond if that's all right.
Yeah.
During, as I mentioned, during that transition from achievement contracts to the enhanced framework for student learning, we lost a little bit there, right? And so I acknowledge that. And when we get to a point where we're adding objectives into the operational plan, as well as strategies and indicators of success, I think that's what you'll see. Some of this would be baseline data as we, you know, plan our next strategy for improvement.
Sorry, and if I may on that, you know, because there's been talk about where we are in comparison to the province or other districts, and really what matters to me isn't where we are in comparison to other districts, because we're unique. We're all unique. Every school district in the province is unique. What matters to me is that we show continuous improvement in our efforts. And so I would be less interested in knowing where we are compared to other districts unless we're showing the story of another district's improvement that we have learned from and are utilizing ourselves. But that's my own personal opinion in terms of comparing us to other parts of the province, but I'd rather that space be taken up by showing us over time.
Okay, thank you. All right, Trustee Keller and then Ms. Lee, and then I want to try to wrap this up.
Thank you. So actually, Trustee Higginson asked what I was going to ask. Basically, I think I was trying to make a link between what the data is showing and what we have been talking about through our budget presentation so far. But now I'm starting to recognize that this is more baseline, but it could really help inform our decision making process. So I think my question is already answered.
All right, Ms. Lee?
Just in regards to the mental health dashboard, is this report like actually easy to find for like anyone?
No.
No? Okay.
Okay. All right. Hearing that, is there anybody who's like dying to say something that they haven't had a chance to say? Okay. All right, I'm going to get us to move on. I had a comment, but I'm going to say it's not important enough to bother with, and we will move on to our, I think, last item of the agenda. Secretary Treasurer McVeigh, capital plan bylaw.
So we recently received our capital plan response letter for 2019-2020, which is also attached to your agenda. Not sure which page it's on.
This one? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I think it was distributed and it's in front of you. So the capital plan response letter indicates projects that have been approved for 1920, but what goes with that is a capital plan bylaw that's non-monetary in nature, but the board needs to pass that. You've already done a resolution, which was for the 1920 plan, and we're just looking for the bylaw to be obviously passed at the board meeting, the recommendation is that the Board of Education for School District 68 give all 3 readings of the capital bylaw in one meeting, and that you also adopt the capital plan bylaw.
Okay, Trustee McKay, did I see your hand? And then Trustee Higginson.
I was going to move the recommendation that the business committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District 68.
Number 68 and Anna Lady Smith give all 3 readings of the capital bylaw number 2019/20-CPSD 68-01 in one meeting and adopt capital plan bylaw number, oh boy, I'm saving 2019/20-CPSD 68-01.
All right, do I have a seconder? Trustee Higginson. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, motion, the recommendation is moved. Carried.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so given that, I think we have gone through the main parts of our agenda. Do we have any, I see no unfinished business or anything of that nature. Do we have any questions from the question period? No?
Let's pull line services back again.
Pardon?
We'd like a presentation on Poker Schools, please.
All right, I would like to call for a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.
All right, so moved, McKay and Stanley.